The judge said my husband would get the house, the savings, the business, everything. Everyone waited for me to cry. Instead, I smiled and said, finally. If that doesn't make sense yet, stick with me, because that smile was the most expensive mistake my husband ever made. The courtroom felt frozen in time. Even the air seemed heavy. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and loud, like it was reminding me I was still standing. I kept my hands folded in my lap, so no one would see them shaking. Across the room sat Graham Larkin. Perfect suit. Perfect posture. The same confident look he wore every time he believed he had won. He didn't look at me once. Not when the judge cleared his throat. Not when the lawyer began listing everything I was about to lose. The house in Cedar Ridge. The savings we built together. The business that started in our garage with 2 folding chairs and 1 borrowed laptop. All his. Each word landed like a quiet slap. I felt eyes on me, the lawyers, the clerk, even a woman sitting behind me. They were waiting for tears. For anger. For me to beg. Ms. Alara Larkin, the judge said gently, adjusting his glasses. You understand you're leaving this marriage with no marital assets? I nodded once. My throat felt tight, but my voice came out calm. Yes, Your Honor. Graham's lawyer glanced at me with boredom, already turning pages. To them, I was finished. Used up. Disposable. Then I looked at Graham. For the first time, he met my eyes. There was pride there. Relief. Satisfaction. He believed he had stripped me of everything that made me matter. That's when I smiled. It wasn't big. It wasn't dramatic. Just enough. Finally, I said. The word echoed louder than I expected. Graham's head snapped toward me. His brows pulled together, confused. Just for a moment, his confidence cracked. No one else understood that smile. Not yet. They thought I was broken. But what I felt wasn't loss. It was freedom. As the judge ended the hearing, I stood up lighter than I had in years. Graham walked past me without a word, already planning his victory dinner. I watched him go, knowing something he didn't. He had taken everything I wanted him to take. And that was exactly the point. In the beginning, Graham was charming in a way that made everyone trust him. He opened doors, remembered small details, and spoke softly when he held Alara's hand. When they married, she believed she was lucky. He made her feel chosen. At first, his control didn't look like control at all. I'll handle the bills, he said with a smile. You don't need to stress about money. When her paycheck went into his account, it felt practical. When he asked her to quit her job to help with his business idea, he called it teamwork. We're building our future, he told her. She believed him. Slowly, her world became smaller. If she wanted to buy something, she had to ask. If she mentioned returning to work, he laughed gently and said, Why would you? I take care of you. When friends invited her out, he sighed and said, I just miss you when you're gone. It didn't sound cruel. It sounded loving. But over time, Alara noticed she was apologizing for everything. For spending money. For wanting time alone. For having opinions that didn't match his. Graham began correcting her in front of others. That's not how it happened, he'd say casually. Or, you're remembering it wrong again. She would laugh it off, embarrassed, even when she knew she was right. When she helped grow the business, he praised her privately but took credit publicly. I'm the face of it, he said. That's just how these things work. She stopped arguing. Whenever she felt uncomfortable, he reminded her how much he did for her. You don't have to worry about anything, he'd say. Most women would be grateful. So she tried to be grateful. She told herself she was lucky to be provided for. Lucky to have a husband who didn't yell or hit or drink. Lucky, even as she slowly disappeared inside her own life. Some nights, she would stare at the ceiling and wonder when she had stopped feeling like a person and started feeling like an expense. But she never said it out loud. Because Graham had taught her something very carefully, over many years. That her value came from being easy. Quiet. Small. And the most dangerous part was this. She had started to believe him. Alara never meant to hear the conversation. She had come home early that afternoon because her head was pounding and the office felt too loud. The house was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the hallway clock. She set her bag down and walked toward the study, planning to lie down. That was when she heard Graham's voice. He was laughing. Not the polite laugh he used in public, but the relaxed one he saved for people he trusted. She paused near the door when she heard another woman speak through the phone. Once the divorce is final, everything's clean, the woman said. No loose ends. Alara's breath caught. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. Graham lowered his voice. She won't fight it. She never does. I've already moved most of the money. The words felt unreal, like they belonged to someone else's life. What about the business? The woman asked. It's already structured under my name, Graham replied. She helped build it, sure, but legally? It's mine. I planned this years ago. Years. Alara pressed her hand against the wall to stay standing. Her heart was racing, but her body felt numb. As the conversation continued, she learned everything in pieces she never wanted. The affair wasn't new. It had started during the year she quit her job to support the business. The bank accounts had been shifted slowly, little by little, so she wouldn't notice. Even the arguments lately, the cold silence, the sudden criticism, they were part of a plan. A way to wear her down before the divorce. She'll walk away with nothing, Graham said calmly. And honestly, she should be thankful I'm not worse. Alara stepped back quietly, her feet barely touching the floor as she returned to the bedroom. She closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were shaking now. At first, pain rushed in so fast it made her dizzy. The marriage she believed in collapsed in seconds. Every memory felt fake. Every promise suddenly rehearsed. But then something strange happened. The crying didn't come. Instead, her mind went still. If Graham thought she was weak, if he believed she would never question him, then that belief was the only power she had left. And she decided, right there in that silent room, not to warn him, not to confront him, not to fight yet. She would let him think he was winning, and she would start counting every move he didn't realize she was watching. After the night she overheard everything, Alara changed, but not in the way Graham expected. She didn't cry in front of him. She didn't ask questions. She didn't accuse him. Instead, she became quieter, softer, easier to ignore. When Graham announced he wanted a divorce, she nodded like she had already known. If that's what you want, she said calmly. Her voice didn't shake. That alone surprised him. He watched her carefully at first, waiting for emotion. When none came, his confidence grew. He brought papers home and spread them across the table. It'll be simple, he said. No need to drag this out. Alara read every page slowly. Her name appeared in places that meant nothing and disappeared in places that mattered. Still, she didn't argue. She signed. Each signature felt heavy, but she kept her hand steady. Graham smiled wider with every page. To him, it was proof she had finally accepted her place. You're being very mature, he said. Most women make this ugly. She forced a small smile. I'm tired of fighting. That was the truth, just not in the way he thought. As days passed, Graham stopped pretending to be kind. He came home late, took calls in the open, spoke about his future as if she were already gone. He underestimated her silence. While he celebrated, Alara began preparing. She copied old emails late at night. Screenshots. Business records. Documents she was never supposed to notice. She memorized dates. Amounts. Patterns. She didn't take anything. She didn't confront him. She simply learned. When Graham bragged about how easily the divorce would go, she listened. When he mocked her lack of ambition, she nodded. He thought surrender meant weakness. But surrender gave her something she'd never had before. Time. Time to think clearly. Time to stop reacting emotionally. Time to see him exactly as he was, careless, arrogant, and convinced he was untouchable. One evening, he tossed a folder onto the counter. Just final stuff, he said. Sign it when you get a chance. Alara picked up the pen without hesitation. Inside, her heart was pounding. Outside, she looked calm. Graham didn't notice the way her eyes lingered on one specific clause. He didn't see the faint smile she hid by lowering her head. He believed the battle was over. But Alara wasn't giving up. She was stepping back. And sometimes stepping back is the only way to aim properly. Graham didn't want a slow divorce. He wanted a public win. He pushed the process forward as fast as possible, calling lawyers daily and demanding early dates. He told everyone it was better to rip the bandage off. But Alara could see the truth. He wanted control. He wanted to finish her before she had time to think. During meetings, he spoke over her, corrected her answers, acted like she wasn't even there. She doesn't need much, he told the lawyer once. I've always handled everything. Alara sat quietly, hands folded, eyes lowered. She let him talk. When the terms were presented, they were brutal. He wanted the house, the savings, full ownership of the business. Even personal items became arguments. He questioned receipts, mocked memories, reduced years of marriage to numbers on a page. You can keep your clothes, he said casually. I'm not heartless. The room went silent. Everyone waited for Alara to object, to speak up, to remind him she helped build the company, worked without pay, gave up her career. She didn't. She nodded. That's fine, she said softly. Graham blinked, surprised. Then pleased. He leaned back in his chair, confidence flooding his face. See, he said to the lawyer. She understands. Later, alone in the hallway, he added, this will be easier if you don't make trouble. I won't, she replied. Inside, something twisted, but she held it down. At the final meeting, he slid the papers toward her like a prize he'd earned. You should be grateful, he said quietly. Most men wouldn't be this generous. Generous. Alara almost laughed. Instead, she signed. One page after another. Every unfair condition. Every demand. No hesitation. No argument. Graham's smile grew wider with each signature. To him, it was proof she was nothing without him. That night, he went out celebrating. He didn't even hide it. Alara stayed home, sitting at the empty kitchen table long after the lights were off. She didn't feel humiliated the way he wanted. She felt focused, because Graham had mistaken her silence for surrender. He believed agreeing meant losing. He didn't realize that by taking everything so greedily, he had also taken something else. Every risk, every liability, every hidden crack beneath the success he was so proud of. And when someone takes everything without looking underneath, they never see the fall coming. There was one part of the paperwork Graham never read carefully. He flipped through those pages like they were harmless. His eyes went straight to the numbers, the ownership lines, the places where his name appeared alone. When he saw that, he felt victorious. He didn't notice the section buried deep in the business transfer. Alara did. Months earlier, when the company was still growing, she had helped file internal documents. Graham barely paid attention back then either. He trusted her to handle the boring parts. She remembered every form, every signature, every quiet rule tied to the business. One clause stayed in her mind. Any owner who assumed full control would also assume full responsibility, including unresolved vendor debts, pending disputes, and personal guarantees attached to expansion loans. When Graham demanded complete ownership during the divorce, Alara didn't hesitate. She let him take it all. At the courthouse, her lawyer asked gently, "You're sure you want to waive your interest?" "Yes," Alara replied. Graham smirked. What he didn't realize was that by pushing her name off the company, he also pushed her off every risk connected to it. Within weeks, small things began going wrong. A supplier sent a late payment notice. Graham ignored it. Another followed. Then a letter from a law firm about a contract dispute he thought had been settled years ago. He brushed it off. Growing pains, he told people. But the letters kept coming. Because when the business expanded, Graham had signed agreements without reading. The same way he signed the divorce papers with confidence. Those agreements were now fully his. Alara, meanwhile, received nothing. No notices. No warnings. No calls. Legally, she was clean. She had walked away exactly as the documents allowed. The pressure built quietly. Interest stacked. Deadlines closed in. Graham began staying late at the office again, not for success this time, but panic. He started snapping at employees, blaming managers, asking questions he should have asked years ago. One night, he called Alara. "Did you know about this?" he demanded. She paused before answering. "You wanted everything," she said calmly. "So you got everything." He hung up without replying. From a distance, Alara watched the foundation crack, not with joy, not with anger, but with certainty. She didn't create his downfall. She simply stepped aside and let his own carelessness finally catch up with him. And for the first time, the weight he had placed on her for years was no longer hers to carry. At first, Graham told himself the problems were temporary. One client delayed a payment. Another asked for time. He blamed the market, the economy, anyone but himself. He kept the same confident tone when he spoke, but the strain was starting to show. Then contracts began disappearing. A long-term client backed out without warning. Another requested a full review of past work. Lawyers became involved, asking questions Graham couldn't easily answer. The same company that once praised his leadership now wanted explanations in writing. Meetings turned tense. Phones stopped ringing. The success he used to brag about started shrinking in front of him. Graham worked longer hours, sleeping at the office some nights. He snapped at employees and blamed them for mistakes that came from the top. People began leaving quietly, one by one. Every problem came with his name alone attached to it. Meanwhile, Alara's life was quiet. She moved into a small apartment with sunlight in the mornings and no shouting at night. She took long walks, cooked simple meals, and slept better than she had in years. She didn't celebrate his struggles. She didn't interfere. She simply lived. When letters arrived at Graham's office marked urgent, none came to her door. When lawyers called demanding answers, her phone stayed silent. That was when he noticed. He drove past her apartment one evening and saw her carrying groceries, calm and unbothered. No stress on her face. No panic in her steps. It unsettled him more than the debt. He called her again. "How are you so fine?" he asked sharply. "After everything?" Alara's voice stayed even. "I'm not responsible for your business anymore." "That company was ours," he snapped. "You made sure it wasn't," she replied. The line went quiet. For the first time, Graham understood something he had never considered. She wasn't falling with him. She wasn't scrambling. She wasn't begging or suffering the way he expected. She had walked away clean, while he carried every risk, every loss, every consequence alone. His confidence began to crack under the weight of reality. The control he once used against her now trapped him. Alara watched from a distance, not with revenge in her heart, but with clarity. She hadn't taken anything from him. She had simply stopped carrying him. And that was when Graham finally realized the truth he feared most. Losing her wasn't the mistake. Believing she was nothing without him was. Graham showed up at Alara's apartment without calling. She opened the door and barely recognized him at first. His suit was wrinkled. His face looked tired. The confidence that once filled every movement was gone. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside before she could answer. Alara stayed calm. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't stop him either. She folded her arms and waited. "You knew," he said suddenly. "You knew what would happen." She looked at him, silent. "The debts, the contracts, the mess I'm in," he continued. "You let me take it all." "I didn't let you," Alara replied softly. "You demanded it." His jaw tightened. "That smile in court," he said. "That wasn't fear. That wasn't defeat." She didn't respond. "That was you knowing," he whispered. The memory hit him all at once. Her calm voice, the single word, the way his victory had felt slightly wrong. He finally understood why it haunted him. "You planned this," he said. Alara shook her head. "No. I adapted." He took a step closer, panic breaking through. "You could help me fix this. You know the company better than anyone." She met his eyes then, steady and unmoved. "You stopped asking for my help the day you decided I was disposable," she said. His voice softened. "Alara, we were married." "Yes," she replied. "And you made sure I left with nothing." He waited for anger, for tears, for emotion he could still control. None came. She wasn't cold. She was finished. "I don't owe you explanations," she said calmly. "And I don't owe you comfort." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. For years, Graham had relied on her patience, her understanding, her willingness to smooth things over. Now there was nothing to reach for. He realized then that the power he thought he held, money, titles, ownership, meant nothing anymore. Because power wasn't about what he took. It was about what she no longer gave. He stood there, defeated, while she opened the door behind him. "This conversation is over," Alara said. As he stepped out, she didn't watch him leave. She simply closed the door. And in that quiet moment, the balance finally shifted. Not with revenge, not with cruelty, but with certainty. For the first time in their lives together, Graham understood something he could never undo. She had already won. Graham's fall didn't happen all at once. It came in quiet pieces. Word spread fast in business circles. Clients talked. Partners distanced themselves. Meetings that once welcomed him now ended early. People who used to praise his confidence stopped returning his calls. The reputation he worked years to build faded within months. Money followed. Accounts froze. Credit tightened. Lawyers demanded answers he couldn't give. Every mistake was traced back to him alone. The company that once made him feel powerful became a constant reminder of everything he couldn't control. Even his personal life began to collapse. The woman he left Alara for grew impatient. Stress changed everything between them. Late nights turned into arguments. Blame replaced excitement. "This isn't what you promised," she snapped one evening. Graham had no answer. When the pressure increased, she left, quietly, the same way Alara once did. Only this time, there was no one waiting patiently at home. He was alone, with nowhere else to turn, Graham went back to the only person who had ever steadied his life. Ilara. He sent messages at first. Apologies filled with regret. Long explanations about stress, fear, mistakes. When she didn't respond, he showed up again. I lost everything, he said, standing in front of her. The business. The people. Even her. Ilara listened without interrupting. I know I hurt you, he continued. But we were good once. We can fix this. Together. She studied his face, not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. You didn't lose everything, she said quietly. You chose it. He reached for her hand. She stepped back. I carried your weight for years, she went on. I won't carry it again. But I need you, he said. That's the difference, Ilara replied. I don't need you anymore. Her refusal wasn't loud. There were no speeches. No insults. Just truth. Graham realized then that reconciliation wasn't about love. It was about survival. And she was no longer responsible for his. As he walked away, she felt no triumph. No urge to chase closure. Only relief. Because the price of taking everything wasn't something Graham had paid in court. It was something he paid afterward. In silence. Alone. Without the woman he once believed would always save him. Life became quiet after everything ended. Not empty, just calm. Ilara rebuilt slowly, on her own terms. She found work she enjoyed, not because it impressed anyone, but because it made her feel capable again. She decorated her small home with things she chose herself. Nothing fancy. Just peace. There was no dramatic new beginning. No sudden success story. Just steady breathing. For the first time in years, she made decisions without asking permission. She spent money without fear. She laughed without checking someone else's mood first. She didn't rush to forgive Graham. She didn't need to. Forgiveness felt like another demand placed on her, another way to minimize what she survived. Instead, she chose understanding. She understood that what happened wasn't because she was weak. It was because she stayed too long trying to be kind to someone who benefited from her silence. Some nights, she thought about the courtroom. The cold bench. The sound of the judge's voice. The way everyone expected her to fall apart. She remembered the word she spoke. Finally. Back then, it sounded sharp. Almost defiant. Now, it meant something else. Finally, free from explaining herself. Finally, free from shrinking. Finally, free from carrying another person's ego as her responsibility. She realized she hadn't smiled because she knew revenge was coming. She smiled because deep down, her body recognized the end of a cage before her mind caught up. There were still scars. Some mornings she woke with heaviness in her chest. Some memories still hurt. But pain no longer controlled her direction. She didn't rebuild her life to prove anything to Graham. She rebuilt it because she deserved to live fully, without fear, without guilt, without being made small. One afternoon, while walking home, she passed a courthouse downtown. For a moment, she stopped. She didn't feel anger. She felt gratitude. Not for the loss, but for what the loss gave her. Everything she thought had been taken from her had only been weighing her down. And the truth finally settled, warm and steady inside her. She didn't lose everything that day. She lost the lie that told her she needed permission to exist. And now, when she thought that word again, finally, it no longer sounded like an ending. It sounded like the beginning. If this story touched you, remember this. Walking away from control is not failure. It's self-respect. Emotional abuse often hides behind care and providing. If you learned something today, support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more real-life lessons and powerful stories.